Today we're talking again about the Slapjack Supra from Too Fast and Furious. But here's how it started. For many people, Slapjack Supra was a love it or a hate it affair. But honestly, it was one of the most modified cars you'll find in the first 3 movies. It has an extremely interesting backstory, so let's take a closer look at it. After the success of the first movie, Universal decided to make a sequel. Its original working title was Fast and Furious 2, as shown here in this script. This movie would also focus mostly on tuner cars. Unfortunately, Vin Diesel was not coming back as he was making other movies, but many of the cars from the first movie were coming back. In fact, we recycled many of the cars from the first movie, including the Eclipses, the Civics, the S2000s, and the Supras. We also had originally designated a Toyota MR2 Spider as Suki's car and an Acura NSX to be used for an unnamed character. In the case of the Supras, 4 of them came over from the first movie. The 4 Supras that came over from the first movie were Stunt 1 from the first movie, which became the Flame car in the second movie. Stunt 2 from the first movie became the Hero 2 car in the second movie. Stunt 3 from the first movie became the Jump car in the second movie. And the Buck car was repainted and repurposed as a Mick rig for this movie. We also went out and bought a 5th Supra to turn into our Hero 1 car for this movie. This Hero 1 Supra was originally red. For those of you who don't know, the Hero 1 car is the prettiest and shiniest car. Replicas of this car are built as backups and for stunt cars. This is why it's important to understand that each of these cars has a specific role on set. The Hero 1 car, as I said, gets all the goodies. That story is coming up right after the break. Don't forget that I'm raffling off the number 1 1/8 GTR made by Phantom. It's an exact copy of my movie car in Too Fast, Too Furious. I have the only one that's completely put together. It's the first one off the production line. It's sitting upstairs in my office. $50 gets you a chance to own this car. I have a spreadsheet. You have 100 entries, and we're going to do the ball thing. If your number is picked, you get it, and you only paid $50. If you buy the kit piece by piece by piece, it's going to be $2,000. So $50 gets you a chance. You can buy multiple slots, and if you want to get with me, hit me with a DM, and I'll tell you how to do it. Okay? You have to remember that Hollywood usually just buys cars and slaps on a few cosmetic mods. But in the first Fast and Furious movie, Universal rented all of the Hero 1 cars and we built replicas. But not this time. For Too Fast, Too Furious, we were mostly reusing leftover cars from the first movie. But with the Supra, instead of just adding wheels and a body kit, this car was going to be way more extensively modified. Essentially, I had a lot of freedom to do what I wanted with these cars. In the first movie, I had to call vendors and beg for parts to build these cars. For this movie, a phone call to vendors was usually enough to get a truckload of goodies delivered within days. So many parts were being delivered, in fact, we had to use a barcode system to track every part before, during, and after the movie. With parts now pouring in, we got started. The initial work took place at Eddie Paul's warehouse in El Segundo, California, which is where we built the cars for the first movie, if you remember. We started with paint and bodywork. I opted for the TRD wide body look, although we used a replica kit as TRD was not about to hand over 5 full body kits with spares. These kits, in fact, came from Donnie Key at Versus Motorsports. Paint for this car was from House of Colors and was paint code PBC47, which was called Gold Mine Pearl. Tuner veterans will probably recognize that I was going after the top secret Supra insofar as my styling inspiration. I knew we would never get help from Japanese tuner companies, so I had to work with what we could get. Since production of the car started in California, we only had time to work with other local suppliers. And while we wanted top secret, Valeside, and Abflug parts, we had to work with what we could source locally. Our Hero 1 Supra went to Gretty Performance in Irvine, California, where it received a host of parts, including things like a T88 turbo and a Gretty E-Manage system. All of this was courtesy of a friend of mine, Charles Shepard, and the good people at Gretty. We opted not to modify the fuel system in support of the big turbo, as it wasn't necessary for how we intended to use the car. While a similar car made 650 plus horsepower, this car was using a low boost setting, and as such, it was more like 400 horsepower, give or take. Again, it didn't need to be fast for what we were going to do with the car. The problem with that is, when Sport Compact Car magazine tested the car later on, it ran a 14.5 quarter mile and did a 0 to 60 in 6.4 seconds, and people were freaking out. Clearly the car needed to be tuned and the boost needed to be turned up, but again, we didn't need to do that while the car was working on the picture. So while this car was capable of making 650 to 800 horsepower, we simply didn't need to go that far with it. Just to be clear again, movie cars do not have to be fast. As long as they can do 60 miles an hour or so, it's good enough for our purposes. Also, to be clear, only the Hero 1 Supra received these engine mods. The other Supras got only a muffler or a shiny exhaust tip. In fact, some of them were non-turbo cars, and even some of them were automatic cars. So Gretty got done with the car and sent it back to us around July 23rd, 2002. Fun fact, while Gretty was test driving the car, the hood latch failed and the hood and clear Lexan engine cover was damaged. The windshield was also broken. It took 3 days to fix that, no fault to Gretty though. Once we got the car back from Gretty and from the repair shop, it was time to get the interiors done. Each of our 4 Supras were going to get a crazy audio-video system. I drew up some sketches of what I wanted and sent them in for approval. Once approved, we sent the cars to West Coast Customs, which was still over by LAX airport at the time, who handled the installation of the basic components. We used predominantly Panasonic and Rockford Fosgate components, as they were helping us with many of the cars and they were a sponsor for the movie. The roll cage that we used came from a design I had sketched up. It was 100% built in-house by our team of technicians. We had to make a roll cage for every Supra because cosmetically, the cars had to be identical and cages would be seen from the outside. What I mean is that we had multiple Supras. We had the Hero car plus stunt car, so all of them need to look cosmetically identical. So whatever we did that could be seen from the outside on the Hero car had to be replicated on the other cars that we built. The stunt car received a special roll cage that was reinforced for its big jump scene. More on that in a minute. Nitrous Express had graciously jumped on board for this movie and provided nitrous systems for all the Supras and the GTRs, as you remember. The nitrous systems were never functional for these cars except on my GTR. One of the other things we came up for the Supra was the clear Lexan hood. My thought was that this engine, with its big turbo, was too good not to be seen. Eddie Paul was able to design and produce it using a vacuform machine. Again, to make the other cars look the same as the Hero 1 car, we had to actually take a photo of the modified engine and attach it to a panel under the hood so that from the outside, you couldn't tell that it was fake. You have to remember that getting a good quality picture with cameras from 2002 was no easy job. Another fun fact is that the replicas of the Hero 1 Supra used stock metal hoods with holes cut into them to look like TRD hoods. Before the cars left California for the big move to Florida, the exterior mods and stereo mods were done. The interior pieces, like the seats and door panels, were soon shipped to Shamrock Auto in South Florida for reupholstering, even though we started with Sparco components. The art department had come up with a butterscotch color meant to accent the exterior. Personally, I envisioned a dark gray suede to match the OZ Superleggera wheels, but that was not to be. Filming started in Miami, Florida in September of 2002. As the cars neared completion, it was time for the graphics. The art department considered dozens of designs. In the end, they selected an Afro pick design, which was intended to match the look of his character, who was called Slapjack. Slapjack, it seems, was always walking around with an Afro pick in his hair. I can't help wonder what social justice warriors would think about this today. The graphics were done by Modern Image, the same people who did the graphics for the first movie. This car only appears in one sequence, the four-way street race. This part of the script went through many changes, not the least of which was the bridge jump scene. In this scene, the Supra jumps after the GTR, and the script mentions nothing about the GTR flying over the Supra. Our stunt Supra, VIN number 04581, which was stunt car number 3 in the first movie, would be used for this stunt. As the storyboard shows, the Supra jumps after the GTR lands, but in the movie, the Supra jumps first and the GTR jumps over it. But the end result is the same. The Supra's oil pan is crushed, the front wheel explodes according to the script, and chaos ensues. The Supra jump, of course, was mostly CG, but the landing was not. We used a custom ramp as shown here. The ramp was about 5 feet high and was placed on the launch side of the bridge. The bridge, in fact, in reality, was raised only very slightly. This shot shows the landing of the Supra from our stunt ramp. As you can tell, the car is missing the lower portion of the front bumper and is using stock Supra wheels. The red glow you see is from red neon lights. This car actually in fact used both red and green neon lights. The reason was that we simply ran out of green lights, and so when the green ones broke, we replaced them with red. In real life, the Supra's landing was pretty severe. The stunt driver had been placed into the car with a special suspension harness to limit the impact. Kevin Jackson was a stuntman for this, and his seat position, the harnesses, the roll cage, and the safety padding were all custom fit to his body. With Slapjack Supra now wrecked and with no further use for it, it was sent back to our warehouse. After the movie wrapped, most of these cars were sold. About 7 years after that, I saw a picture on the internet. This guy had it in a field like in Alabama or something like that. Grass all over it, all that kind of shit. It was weird. I understand that it had been restored. So when the movie was done, the same thing happened after the first movie. They sent the cars back to the warehouse and just parked them there. At some point, another movie was coming up, and so they called Universal. Do you have race rockets? You know, Fast and Furious cars? Yes, we do. Can we get some? What do you want? So I called my former boss, and he says, yeah, we got this. So these cars wound up in Today You Die, Grandma's Boy, and an episode of NCIS. And allegedly it was on Tokyo Drift in the garage scene, but I didn't see it. It sat on Universal's lot for years and years and years. It got sold. Some of the cars went over to Germany and Europe. I think one more is running around in the United States, but I'm not quite sure. I think that's all for today. Next week, I'm switching gears, really. I'm going to get off this Fast and Furious. I'm done here. So I'm going to start a new series called This versus That. Send me your comments on Instagram. What do you want me to compare? All right? All right, guys. Thanks for watching. See you next week.